This video is looking at how to approach language analysis in a kind of stepped approach. So before we start, you'll need a copy of the extract, that's the Lord of the Flies extract dealing with the fire, and a pen, so you can start to annotate and make some notes as we go through. So the first thing to do is to make sure that you look at the contextual information that you're given on any extract. So usually it will give you some key information that you need to be able to make sense of what you're about to read. So this says that a forest fire has started to rage out of control on a desert island where a group of schoolboys have been stranded alone after a plane crash. And it reminds you you're going to read the extract and answer the question below. Smoke was rising here and there among the creepers that festooned the dead or dying trees. As they watched, a flash of fire appeared at the root of one wisp, and then the smoke thickened. Small flames stirred at the trunk of a tree and crawled away through leaves and brushwood, dividing and increasing. One patch touched a tree trunk and scrambled up like a bright squirrel. The smoke increased, sifted, rolled outwards. The squirrel leapt on the wings of the wind and clung to another standing tree, eating downwards. Beneath the dark canopy of leaves and smoke, the fire laid hold on the forest and began to gnaw. Acres of black and yellow smoke rolled steadily toward the sea. At the sight of the flames and the irresistible course of the fire, the boys broke into a shrill, excited cheering. The flames, as though they were a kind of wildlife, crept as a jaguar creeps on its belly towards a line of birch-like saplings that fledged an outcrop of the pink rock. They flapped at the first of the trees, and the branches grew a brief foliage of fire. The heart of flame leapt nimbly across the gap between the trees, and then went swinging and flaring across the whole row of them. Beneath the capering So first pass through, once you've read it for sense, you've read it for tone, you think you know what's going on, take a moment to properly try and imagine things stage by stage. So we start off with little bits of smoke among the dead trees. Then the smoke at the base of one wisp of smoke, so a wisp of smoke being a kind of little fog tendril, a little fog kind of pillar of smoke. All of a sudden there's a flash of flame. And then once that initial flash of flame has gone up, the fire starts to grow and takes hold and moves from tree to tree to tree. Right? You'll be aware on your second read that the squirrel that's talked about starts off as a simile and then becomes a metaphor. We're not dealing with a real squirrel, we're dealing with a flame which is acting like being compared to a squirrel. The fire takes hold and we get this feeling that it's increasingly eating. It began to gnaw. More or less all of the kind of forest is going up in fire. There's a vast expanse from this one little flame, acres of black and yellow smoke. Okay, an acre is a measure of distance, which is a considerable amount of land. The boys notice it and they're happy, they're excited. The flames take on this idea of being something wild that's kind of hunting, pursuing, leaping round. The boys are capering, the boys are running round, dancing round. And it's important to do that because if you don't pace yourself, if you don't go through and check things, you might actually make mistakes like thinking that squirrel is a real squirrel, which will bring your understanding and therefore your analysis down. If you're not doing an exercise like this in timed conditions, your next step is to go and identify the words you don't understand and to do something about filling in that gap. So for our extract today, if you don't know that a creeper is like a vine, it's also one of the things on Minecraft, but it's like a vine, okay, then you might go and look that up. Festooned means to be draped over in a way that's decorating. Okay, normally you would festoon a Christmas tree or a hallway or something at a time of celebration. You might not know what caper means. It means to kind of jump and kind of skip about. You might be unsure as to what a jaguar is. It's a big cat. So all of a sudden you've got those ideas of predators. A sapling is a very young tree. All of these ideas, if you have the luxury of time for this exercise, take the chance to expand your vocabulary. Obviously, if you're doing it timed in an assessment, then you can't. You have to kind of make an educated guess at things. Your next idea then, or your next step, is to try and look for things that immediately stand out to you. Now, that might take two approaches, right? First of all, you might have realised when you're reading through that you have metaphors there. They might have jumped out at you. You might have noticed the use of like or as, so you will know that there's similes in there. You might have spotted personification. Okay, there may be particular words or images that you think kind of, okay, I know the technique behind this. Now that in itself is called feature spotting, and you don't get any credit in an analytical essay for feature spotting by itself. You have to take that extra step and explain exactly why the writer's choice of that technique with that exact image or those exact words has really worked successfully in this particular piece of writing. The second approach you might take is to just get a kind of feeling of something, to look and think, I don't know the technique for that maybe, but it's a really interesting piece of vocabulary or idea or use of words. There's something in there that sets you kind of thinking, I'd quite like to comment on this. Take a moment now to do that exercise. Read through, annotate the things you would come up with on your copy, and pause this video while you do that. Okay, so now you should have looked at what you'd maybe pick up on. And I'm just going to go through it and talk you through maybe some of the areas that I would comment on. And if you haven't got these notes and you think that actually that would be something I would incorporate into my answer, then feel free to add these to your own notes. Okay, so the idea that smoke is becoming increasingly obvious, and it's taking over what was a dead or threatening environment. Okay, so the fire is taking hold of somewhere that is already dead. I might pick up on the alliteration of flash of fire. Okay, and if I'm noticing alliteration, I'm always going to try and link it with something onomatopoeic, because I don't ever want to be just pointing out alliteration. That's just feature spotting. But if I can get a sound effect from it, that's worth something. So for a fire breaking out, it's almost got that kind of quality of the flames starting to burst into life. We're starting to get personification of the fire. So stirred, the idea that it is waking up. Okay, stirred, the verb, usually implies something has been asleep and it's starting to move. Crawling away shows it's moving through the forest, and you've got something that is taking on a life of its own. Now, you can refer to this as personification. It may be that actually you want to become a little more precise in your ideas, and you might want to look at ideas of zoomorphism. Okay, personification is where you give something that doesn't have, isn't human, isn't animate, qualities like a person. Okay, personification, qualities like a person. Zoo is animals, morph is change, so zoomorphism is where something is changed into an animal instead. For this kind of answer, you would get credit for personification, credit for zoomorphism. You might kind of use both. So you're looking at the presentation of the fire, and then you get, it touched, it scrambled up, simile like a bright squirrel. Ask yourself exactly why, in this circumstance, is this fire like a squirrel? Okay? You're not going to go down the lines of it's eating nuts and it's planning to hibernate for the winter, right? You're going to think it's lively, it's energetic. If you're thinking of red squirrels, it might also have the same colouring. Right? Make sure that you're making those really specific connections, right? It's leaping frantically in a lively way from tree to tree. It maybe can't be caught, right? These are all reasons that you can set out as to why that simile and that image are effective. It then moves into being a metaphor. Okay, the squirrel leapt. And it clings. Think about the connotations of cling, or past tense clung. In terms of if you cling to something, you won't let go. Okay, there's an idea of almost kind of desperately wanting to have it. It's eating, right? Consuming. It's greedy. Beneath the dark canopy of leaves, the fire laid hold on the forest and began to gnaw. Again, we've got these images now, 2 images about consumption, about greed, about hunger. If you gnaw on something, it's a very specific type of biting. It's that very tenacious. Okay, you might want to look up the word tenacious. It's a very tenacious, determined biting to get every last little bit off. A dog would gnaw a bone. You have the kind of expanse of this fire. It's huge. It's being now measured in acres. It is giving the boys a kind of excited, dangerous hysteria. It's prompting this wild excitement in them, rather than them realising, in fact, that they've set their island on fire. Okay? The flames begin to become part of the jungle, as though, so this simile, crept as another simile, as a jaguar creeps on its belly toward a line of birch-like saplings that fledged an outcrop of the pink rock. Okay, there's loads in there to talk about. The fire is presented as wildlife. That could mean that it's dangerous, but it's also natural. It's part of this environment. It's a danger that you've got to look out for here. A jaguar is a predator, and this one, in this simile, is in hunting mode. It's stalking something. And what it's stalking, our fire jaguar, is stalking a line of birch-like saplings. So a birch is a type of tree, a sapling is a small young tree. So we have this fire jaguar hunting the young trees. Anything that is youthful has connotations of innocence and vulnerability. That's emphasised by the idea of fledge. If something fledges, it is just about to start out in the wide world by itself. It's a word that we take from birds. Okay, a bird standing on the edge of the nest for the first time, about to launch, is facing that moment of make or break. It's either going to fly or it's going to fall out and die. That is a fledgling. Okay, so if something is a fledgling, it's a young, vulnerable thing which is at a make or break moment, right? And so you've got that idea of these are fledging on an outcrop on a sticky out bit of rock. So these trees are vulnerable, young, and they're in danger from this predator. The trees flapped. Okay, so we've got that connection to kind of birds again. The branches grew a brief foliage of fire. So all of a sudden, these things that are about to take off into life get burned up, right? The heart of the flame leapt nimbly. If you're nimble, you're really agile, you're energetic. So that adverb means energetically, gracefully, okay? And then it went swinging and flaring through the whole row of them. So the whole row of trees is lost, right? It's all consumed. The boys are not paying any attention to how serious this situation is. Those ideas, I would start to try and divide them into or group them into patterns. So the fire is presented as a wild natural force. The fire is presented as destructive and dangerous. The fire is presented as hungry. The fire is presented as destroying innocence. Okay, these are all ideas you could use as topic sentences. And rather than just going through the extract chronologically, you could group those ideas to see how they develop. Make sure at all points is a 1/4 mile square of forest was savage with smoke and flame. The separate noises of the fire merged into a drum roll that seemed to shake the mountain. And then in this question, you're invited to answer, how does the writer William Golding present the fire in this extract? You should consider the use of language, form, and structure in your answer. Use paragraphs and short quotations to structure and support your argument. And the smoke and the fire is really starting to be savage, is really starting to be untamed, wild, uncivilized, to the extent that it starts to give the impression that it's shaking the mountain itself. Joke. But 1/4 mile, the forest was savage with smoke. Look at the connotations of savage. If something is savage, it's violent, it's ruthless, it's uncivilized, it's dangerous. Okay. And then the fire, finally, in this extract, the fire becomes this huge warning sound or sound of anticipation, a drum roll you normally get leading up to something in a show or the theatre or the circus. Right? There's this sense of kind of things are building up. And the idea that it seems to shake the mountain means that it really is kind of a natural, huge, tremendous force, powerful and to be reckoned with. So now you've got that you're using the right register, the right tone. A lot of the writer suggests present tense, the writer conveys, the writer portrays, or Golding could suggest, Golding shows, Golding emphasises. So lots of different words that make sure you're analysing. You're not going to say how clever Golding is. You're going to show that through your analysis of what he's done. You're not going to speculate. You're not going to guess about the way the boys might be feeling or what might happen next. You're going to stay with the evidence in the text. Your job analysing is to look at how the language is working. This language is effective because the writer has made this specific choice, which brings with it all of these ideas about this. Okay, so making sure that you're looking at how it works, not translating or paraphrasing it, not just repeating what's in the quotation, but that you're acting as an expert reader to bring something else to our understanding that we can't just get from knowing what's in the face of the passage. You can analyse single words, short phrases, techniques. You can analyse the development of an image throughout the extract or something about the narrative style. You're making sure that you're paragraphing your answer and that wherever possible, you're embedding your quotations. So don't put a quotation at the start on its own and then your ideas afterwards. Kind of do a little introductory lead into it. So Golding's use of the image Blair, or the simile Mare shows, or the tone of is created through the use of the image, right? Don't just drop those quotations in and leave them. Make sure you're making them part of your own expression. Wherever you can, name a method and really try and go into detail about those connotations and the different connections. In the exam, if you're doing AQA, this will be an 8-mark kind of answer. You're being asked for this exercise to analyse slightly more text than AQA would ask you to look at. Other exam boards will give you bigger chunks of text to look at for more marks. So it's worth just having a go at the whole thing. Okay, good luck.